The alleged behavior shocks the conscience.
The estimated dozens of victims were as young as 14 years old. Children who provided Epstein massages while they were nude or partially nude. Children who were asked to engage in direct and indirect sex acts for money. Children who were enticed to do all these things at the hands of a man more than or nearly 3 times their age.
The charges are very serious, and they carry with them a maximum sentence of 45 years in jail, which to someone of Epstein's age is basically a life sentence. So we think he has every incentive to try and flee. When you have 2 planes, we think that's a very real risk.
Jeffrey Epstein, the multimillionaire accused of sex trafficking young girls in swanky New York and Florida homes, is expected back in court next week for a bail hearing. This is after pleading not guilty yesterday. And all of this comes as mounting pressure is growing to oust a top Trump administration official tied to Epstein's plea deal, which dates back more than a decade. Here's Bryn Gingras, who's on the story.
Growing calls this morning for President Trump's Labor Secretary Alexander Acosta to step down over his handling of sex abuse allegations against multimillionaire Jeffrey Epstein when Acosta was the U.S. Attorney for Florida's Southern District a decade ago. A newly unsealed indictment charges the hedge fund manager with operating a sex trafficking ring where he is accused of sexually abusing dozens of underage girls in his New York City home. Epstein pleaded not guilty to all charges Monday.
As alleged, Epstein was well aware that many of his victims were minors. And not surprisingly, many of the underage girls that Epstein allegedly victimized were particularly vulnerable to exploitation.
According to the New York indictment, Epstein ran a trafficking enterprise between 2002 and 2005. The 66-year-old allegedly paid hundreds of dollars in cash to girls as young as 14 years old to have sex with him at his homes in New York and Palm Beach, Florida. Prosecutors say a search warrant executed on his Manhattan townhouse uncovered a vast trove of lewd photographs of young-looking women or girls. The indictment is a direct rebuke of a secret non-prosecution agreement Acosta negotiated with Epstein's high-powered attorneys in 2008, which suspended a federal grand jury investigation into the allegations against him. In exchange, Epstein pleaded guilty to 2 state prostitution charges. The Miami Herald called it a deal of a lifetime, considering it was a federal investigation identifying 36 underage victims. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is now calling for Acosta's resignation, saying that deal was unconscionable. Attorney General William Barr recused himself from that investigation, but now the Justice Department is looking at whether he needs to recuse himself from any other investigation into the case.
I'm recused from that matter because one of the law firms that represented Epstein long ago was a firm that I subsequently joined for a period of time.
Prosecutors calling for other women to step forward.
The alleged behavior shocks the conscience. They deserve their day in court, and we are proud to be standing up for them by bringing this indictment.
And a lot of new developments. A rep for former President Bill Clinton, who reportedly took trips on Epstein's plane in the early 2000s, has now released a statement. It said, quote, President Clinton knows nothing about the terrible crimes Jeffrey Epstein pleaded guilty to in Florida some years ago, or those with which he has been recently charged in New York. The White House, meantime, is also distancing itself and President Trump from knowing Epstein, and then defended the Labor Secretary.
I talked to the president this morning. He hasn't talked to or had contact with Epstein in years and years and years, and over a decade at least, he said. And he met Alex Acosta when Alex applied and got the job, where he's doing a great job. I mean, look at the economy. So I know everybody, you want to revisit what happened in Florida. New York has applied fresh charges to Jeffrey Epstein because they have a right to do that. And I hope we're all paying attention to who the true perpetrator is here.
There is also a new response just out from Alexander Acosta himself. He tweeted this out, quote, the crimes committed by Epstein are horrific, and I am pleased that New York prosecutors are moving forward with a case based on what he says is new evidence. Joining me now to discuss, Ambrosio Rodriguez. He's a former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney in Los Angeles. Ambrosio, I was struck. You called this the most remarkable case you have ever seen.
Right, because in terms of corruption, I mean, that's really a big part of the case. There's two aspects of this case, right? It's Epstein's abuse of these girls, and we should just call them what they are. They are children, which went on. It was something that he had so much money and he had so much influence that he didn't work alone, right? He had other people that worked for him that allowed this to happen, an entire staff that knew and saw these girls coming in and out of the house. I mean, a 14-year-old girl looks like a 14-year-old girl who would go into his massage room and pleasure him, right? And these girls would recruit other girls. And now that there's this level of corruption in which a plea bargain that was made that, I've been a lawyer now 22 years. I have never seen anything like this before in my life. I mean, this is something out of kind of a John Grisham novel. And I think people are very angry and very upset because this is such a blatant example of a level of corruption at the highest level. This kind of justice is a bought justice, and I think I speak for a lot of people that I'm just very happy that the Southern District of New York has taken this case. The Miami Herald did a great job in bringing this back to life. And now it seems from the search warrant on his, just so everybody knows, a $56 million house, that they found a trove of alleged child pornography that he labeled and collected, which, by the way, is very common with predators and pedophiles, is a collection of child pornography.
Yeah, I mean, the other big question is how many other people were involved? There were orgies on private islands, according to the indictment, that some of his employees made the payments to some of these girls. I mean, do you think we're going to see some high-powered friends being exposed as well?
I think so. I mean, I think there's the allegations against Prince Andrew. There's also the fact about former President Bill Clinton going to this island multiple times. He certainly has a kind of a sordid history when it comes to issues of his sexual relationships. So we'll see what happens. And this is obviously everybody's going to kind of run for cover and say, Epstein, I've never known Epstein. But I think there will be kind of superseding indictments in which more people will be charged. And in a case like this, what the federal government usually does is they will work out deals with the kind of the less culpable person in order to guarantee a conviction of the person in charge, right? It's kind of the same kind of the way a mafia case works. And, you know, Epstein is the capo in this case.
And all of this, the prosecutor says, is just to get justice for these young girls, children, as you point out. One of the victims spoke outside of court. Listen.
Just to hear that they're standing up for the victims, you know what I mean? It's just like so overwhelmingly it's past due.
I mean, one of the lawyers for the alleged victims says that they have gotten 4 phone calls over the last 24 hours. We still don't know how many more there are out there.
Well, right. And Epstein's kind of has a scorched earth policy, right? Because there was another case, a civil case in Florida, in which he actually kind of fabricated evidence against a civil attorney in the civil case against him and tried to destroy this attorney who was just trying to get justice for his victims, for the victims in a civil case. There's also the corruption at the Manhattan DA's office where Cy Vance, and for people who don't know, Cy Vance comes from a very old and very wealthy family who's the district attorney of Manhattan. And they actually went to court to try to lower his registration level as a sex offender. And the judge, you know, laughed at the DAs, told them, are you kidding me? So there is so much money being thrown around, and it has been thrown around by Epstein for a very long time. Yeah. You know, look, his current attorney was actually my professor in law school a long time ago. I mean, he is one of the toughest defense lawyers in America. So it's going to be a long fight.
Yeah, it is indeed. Ambrosio Rodriguez, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.